Well, clearly, if it's destructible and you never want this to happen again, why break it into only 2 pieces?
Yes, exactly. Why is that considered effective?
You could have just melted that sucker down again and turned it into vapor if you wanted, right? You could vaporize it.
Right. Like, why save it at all? Why not actually destroy it?
3, 2, 1, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in the DeLorean. Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly, the podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly? This episode of Does It Fly is presented by Netflix, the exclusive home of Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft. This exciting new chapter in the Tomb Raider franchise stars Hayley Atwell as the voice of Lara Croft, alongside Richard Armitage, Alan Maldonado, and Zoe Boyle. Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft is now streaming only on Netflix.
Welcome.
Hello, Hakeem. How are you?
I am on the road still. I am in Vegas to judge a pageant.
Really?
Yes. I am. It's a different kind of pageant. It's a pageant where it's not just looks, but also brains and accomplishment. So they needed a nerd.
Well, you definitely fit that, so you're good to go.
Exactly. I always say I'm a science mercenary. I should change to nerd mercenary. Like any nerdy thing you need accomplished, I'm here for you. I can do it. I can get the job done. Nerd for hire.
That's very reassuring.
Yes. So what are you up to? Busy summer you had?
No, just, like we're in the thick of it with school and stuff like that. So just kind of like trying to ride the wave of high school and manage, or being the parent of a high schooler, which is new for us this year. And
oh, really?
Managing,
freshman?
Yeah. So, so it's different because like suddenly all the things count. Right? Like grades count in a different way, and, activities count in a different way. And yet I don't want to put pressure on my kiddo to like feel like everything is so important. Like I want her to enjoy high school, but it definitely has a different feel to it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out like what that balance beam is. What was your favorite extracurricular when you were in high school? Or did you do extracurriculars? What was your thing?
Oh yeah. So I was a musician. I loved being a musician. So I don't know if you've seen the movie Drumline.
Yes.
But it was very similar. So I was I lived in racially segregated Mississippi. So I attended an all black high school, and we, and our band was about bass and drum. And so it was just like the plot of the movie. We had a conservative band director, and then my group came along, and we decided we wanted to play the music from the radio, right? Yeah, and so I had 2 musicians in my band, a guy and a girl, Dwight and Anita, who could hear the song and play the notes. And I had the ability to arrange music. So once they gave me the lead and the bass line, I was writing it for the band, and boom.
What was the sort of rebellious song that you
so rap was new. Was new. Yeah. So we had this one thing at halftime where we would go to Run DMC's It's Like This. We would say, I wrote the little lyric, and then, we talk trash the other side and go, it's like that. And that's the way it is. And then I played the tuba. And so everybody but the tuba and the drum will put their instruments down and dance while we do the bass line and the boom, 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 right? and the drum beat.
I'm picturing you at the big like,
yeah. So anyway, today we're talking about something very geeky. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider.
That's right. We are speaking of blasts from the past, we are
Yes.
specifically going to talk about the first live action Lara Croft movie, which came out in 2001, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, directed by Simon West. And this was, kind of revolutionary. You had this iconic video game character married to, I'm just going to say, the perfect actress to play her. And this franchise is big, obviously. There was a hugely successful video game series. There's arcade games. They made it for all different formats, everything, from mobile to Game Boys to consoles, et cetera, et cetera. There were comics. There were Tomb Raider comics. And then we got to the film. So you had the two movies that starred Angelina Jolie in the early aughts. And then you had the 2018 movie with, I always pronounce her name wrong, Alicia Vikander.
Oh, I didn't see the later one.
For folks who are new to Does It Fly, the way our show works is we look at a gadget or a conceit from sci-fi and fantasy movies, and then Hakeem takes a look at it, Dr. O takes a look at it from the scientific perspective. What's the science behind it? Does it exist? Could it ever exist? And render some judgment on does it fly? I will then take a look at it from the story world perspective. How does this device play into the story, further the story? Does the story world follow its own rules? And then we'll do our final pass on does it fly for the feels? Does it fly for the vibes? Which will be a little bit more of an esoteric conversation when we get there. So, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, and today we're just going to, even though this is a huge franchise, today we are just going to specifically talk about the 2001 movie and a device in that. That said, I don't know if folks are aware that Netflix is actually doing a new animated series. Tomb Raider, The Legend of Lara Croft is coming out, and I gotta say, the voice of Lara is being done by Haley Atwell, who I love.
All right.
For Marvel fans may know her best as Peggy Carter.
All right. Hey, listen, if you're talking to the EP, the production team, the writers, the showrunner, and they need a demonic laugh, tell them you know a guy.
Well, if I talk to them again, I will. But it's funny that you bring that up because I did actually get a chance to sit down with the showrunner, and we will be releasing that as a special little Does It Fly minisode. So keep an eye out on our channels, on our socials at Does It Fly Pod, and on the website doesitflypod.com, our YouTube channel, so you can get some insight into what went into the making of the new episode or the new series on Netflix as I talk to the actual folks involved in making it about what they needed to do to make it fly.
Yes. All right. So in today's show, we're going to be talking specifically about Lara Croft's ancient artifact of time control.
The triangle of light.
Whoa. Light is so mysterious.
Do you want to explain what this thing supposedly does?
Yeah, so the triangle of light allows you to control time, and the Illuminati is after it. So tell me, Tamara, when you first joined the Illuminati, did you have to make a blood sacrifice or?
Hakeem, we've had this conversation before. We're not allowed to talk about this on air. This is the off-screen conversation.
Okay, all right.
Are you trying to get me kicked out? Come on.
Oh, I thought once you remember there was only one way out, if you know what I'm saying.
I don't know what you're saying. I deny any knowledge of what you were talking about. The Illuminati does not exist. There are no secret societies.
Okay, all right. Every redhead is a part of this. So for those of you who are out there.
You've been watching too much Lara Croft.
I've been watching too much Lara Croft.
Just so folks can follow along if they're not familiar with the movie, but still, want to know. So basically, Lara Croft, British adventurer, Tomb Raider, etc. She basically gets a message from her dead father about this artifact, the Triangle of Light, which has been split into two pieces. Because once you fuse them together, it gives whoever controls it the ability to control time.
And when it was originally used, it destroyed a city. So they were like, we don't want this to happen again. Take it to opposite ends of the earth, right?
Exactly.
The Illuminati finds out, and they want to get both of the parts And Lara Croft's dad does not want that to happen. So he leaves her these secret messages to allow her, with her knowledge of archaeology and cryptography, to figure everything out. And they find it, right? Along with a special clock. And what happens is in the message her father leaves, he talks about something like a grain of a sand holding the universe in your hand. So inside the clock, there's this little ball of what looks like liquid metal. But, you know, the movie has some issues with continuity and CGI. So she takes the two pieces of the triangle, makes them together. There's a hole in the middle. And somehow the grain of sand becomes a big old flake by the time it gets down in there. And then they fuse together. And now she can right some wrongs that have been done with now that she has control of time. So what makes it so powerful? Well, one thing that they hit upon in the movie is that it's made from this meteorite.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into meteorites. So a meteor is, you know, a rock that enters our atmosphere from space. And if they land on the ground and survive, we call them a meteorite. So meteorites come in three types, right? There's irons, stony iron, and stony is what they're called. And so their origins are based on the origin of the solar system itself. Okay. So what we now understand about solar system formation is that where the planets are today is not where they formed. And the planets that we have today are not the original planets that formed. What formed was a huge swarm of protoplanets, right? Smaller planet-like objects. Jupiter formed first, but then you had all these smaller protoplanets. So where now we just have like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, there would have been like 3-4 dozen objects, all right? And they would collide and break apart. So what does that have to do with anything? Here's what it has to do with. When a planet gets big enough, because of the impact heat, because the heat of radioactive elements, they will melt from the core to the surface. And what that does, that allows the denser materials to sink to the center. And so if that protoplanet now, which has what we call chemically differentiated by melting and gravitationally settling, is collided with by another object and gets broken apart, you end up with chunks of core, which are these iron chunks, right? So if you go to the Barringer crater in Arizona, what they call a meteor crater, there's this big giant metal asteroid in there that struck. If you go to the Museum of Natural History in New York, there's a big giant iron meteorite, and that's why. That's the core of a protoplanet that got destroyed. So
how well are we able at this point to, I'll say, categorize or understand the source of these meteorites, the protoplanets?
Yeah, it is much better than it used to be. And the reason why is because now we have samples. We have lots and lots of samples, right? And so every object have these so-called isotopic ratios. So for example, one of the big questions we've had is, where did Earth's water come from? So we've landed crafts on comets, we've landed crafts on asteroids, and because comets are composed mostly of water, we thought Earth water came from comets. But when we measured the isotopic ratios in comet water, it did not match Earth. If you look at the ratio of oxygen isotopes in water, it'll be different for asteroid water than comet water. So asteroids look like dry rocks, but Earth's water matches asteroid water. It doesn't match comet. Yeah, right.
Do you know when, when did they kind of have the shift of going, oh no, actually the water didn't come from comets?
In our lifetimes, like sometime in the early 2000s, I think. I think the first time, so I think, the Japanese went to Hayabusa. I think we sent a craft to Halley's Comet. And I think the asteroid water, I think when Ryugu, we got some samples. It was the one that happened a little later. But yeah, so that's the deal. So here's the point. In Tomb Raider, they make it like this meteorite metal is something special, okay? There are special things that happen in meteors and meteorites that we find. We find compounds and alloys that we've never found here on Earth. And what that has to do with is when you're melting things, these different metals at different pressures and different temperatures in the presence of different metals, you can get different types of chemistry and metallurgy happening than you would normally see here on Earth. But here's the thing. When they formed the triangle of light, they melted it down. So that means that whatever, if it did have some sort of unique structure because of its formation, just being that particular element is nothing magical about it. Like, we're made up mostly of carbon. So is charcoal. If you eat a piece of charcoal, that doesn't go from being inanimate carbon to now living carbon. It's just carbon. So once you melt down the metal, it's just the metal. It's nothing. The only thing that could have been special about it, you've now ruined, right?
So they screwed up the magic.
Yeah, you would have screwed up whatever magic was there if there had been some magic. So that to me is just really, really weird. And then the whole idea of controlling time in this way doesn't even come close to anything that we know of physically that can allow you to travel forward, backward, slow, different rate of time. Yeah, it's all around. Huh? What? Who came up with this? It's magic, is what it is. It's magic.
Not science. Yeah,
it's not science. Yeah,
but I am fascinated by it because I mean, we could obviously talk about time travel till like the cows come home, but I love this direction you're taking it in. Analyzing it scientifically, literally from like a materials science perspective and the chemistry perspective of like, well, forget all like the time travel stuff. Like, let's actually look at how they put this device together, and they messed it up. I mean, is there, so just because it's fun to play what if?
Yeah.
How, and like, forget it, let's just say time travel could happen. Let's say they could make that piece of it work. Is there a way that they could have made this work? Is it simply by like?
That's what I think of, right? I think, how could I, could this really exist? How could I make this work? And I don't see a way for this one. And there's so many problems. Like, how far does this time bubble extend, by the way, right? Like, is it the whole entire solar system that you're rewinding? Is the whole galaxy? Is the whole universe? Is it a part of Earth? There's so many problems with it.
And I mean, they say it gives you the power of a god. So I'm going to assume from that it's the entire universe of.
Wait, Loki is a god, isn't he? I mean, he couldn't. Not all gods have, are omnipotent. And then the other thing about it that they give a lot of credibility to using it is when there is this planetary alignment of all that's when these powers come together. There's even a total solar eclipse happening, right?
Okay. Like, to me as a layperson, that just sounds like total poppycock. Is there any?
Really?
Yes.
Really? So I would say, think as a layperson, that sounds real. People think a planetary alignment is like, because, we have tides from the moon. So maybe a planetary alignment could just really throw everything out of kilter.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm not your average layperson, but but okay. Like, talk to me about that. Yeah. Does planetary alignment allow for strange things to happen out of the ordinary?
Okay. All right. So the first thing is the planets are always aligned. All right. So have you heard that phrase, the zodiac? So what makes a constellation a zodiac constellation? It has to do with the fact that because our solar system is in a plane, all the planets orbit in the same plane. It's not like one is going this way and another one is going that way, right? So what that means is, by being on one of those planets, looking out at all the rest of them, they all move on this one line in the sky. And that line has a name. We call that the line of the hell do we call it? The zodiac, the plane of the zodiac, the ecliptic. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's called the ecliptic, the plane of the ecliptic.
Okay.
All right. And so as you look into the night sky, all the planets that you can see with the naked eye, the sun and the moon, they move on that line. And the constellations that lie on that line are the constellations of the zodiac. Right. That's why Mars is in Taurus and stuff like that. Okay.
Right.
There's two ways the planets can be in a line. One is an apparent alignment. I can see all of them in the sky at night, like early morning or at dusk, right?
Yeah, and I've done that before. Like, I get a notification. They're like, tonight, when you look up in the sky at 6 a.m., you will see. And that's really cool.
That's really cool. Exactly. And so what that means though, right? Remember, Venus and Mercury are on interior orbits to us. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the other naked eye planets, are on exterior orbits to us. So you have to both be looking away from the sun a great distance and toward the sun. And so what that usually means is that you're looking at the more distant planets when they're on the opposite side of the sun from you.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because that's the only way to have them all in your line of sight.
Right.
Now, then there is a real alignment. Like, what if all the planets really are aligned? Then what that means is that just like you have a new moon, right? When the moon is perfectly between the sun and the earth, Mercury and Venus would be in the new state. So we would not be able to see any of the illuminated sides of them, right? So you would not be able to see Mercury and Venus if you were truly in a line, right? And then the others would be at their brightest because they're like in the full moon state, right? What we call opposition. So get this though, here's what I'm getting at. If it is an alignment that is an apparent alignment and you can see all of them, the more distant planets are the most distant they could possibly get from you because they're opposite the sun from you. Right. So whatever effect they have is diluted even more because of that great distance. But even then, think about it like this. Do you know what planet the Earth is the closest to on average?
No, but tell me so I can win Jeopardy one day.
Right? What would your guesses be? There's typically two answers of one.
Yeah, you would think either Mercury or Venus or Mars.
You would think Venus or Mars, right? Yeah. But the answer is Mercury.
Really?
Yeah. Guess what planet Jupiter is closest to on average?
Well, now I'm going to think it's something. Now I'm going to not think it's Mars or Saturn. I'm going to think it's Venus.
Mercury.
Mercury.
Yeah. All the planets.
What's the deal with Mercury?
Because the planets are on average closer to the sun than they are to each other because they go on opposite sides of the sun from each other, right? And since Mercury is right there going around the sun, if you're closest to the sun on average, you're closest to Mercury on average.
Oh, you're saying on average. So the question there is on average.
On average, exactly. Not at closest approach.
Trickster.
Yeah, so every planet is closer to Mercury than it is to any other planet on average.
On average.
Yeah,
ooh, good. That's a good party trick.
It's a good party trick. So the planetary alignment thing also just doesn't fly because the planets are so far from each other and they're so tiny. Like, let me give you something in your mind. The sun is 100 times bigger than the Earth, and the Earth is 200 solar radii away. All right. So let's say, for example, it's 2 centimeters or inch, right? I'm 2 meters, it'll be about an inch. And it's like, let's say it's 100 meters away from me. That's a football field. So imagine something that is an inch a football field away from me. Do I even notice it's there?
Not really.
Not really. Yeah, you don't even notice something.
And it certainly doesn't seem like there would be any like gravitational force affecting it.
Exactly. Now let's take something half the size, a half an inch, and then put it another 50 yards away from that 1 inch object, right? That's Mars, right? You're not even noticing that stuff, right? They're not noticing each other, right? Something 1 inch, 50 yards away from something half an inch, they don't know each other exist, right? Yeah. So there's nothing to that. So the whole idea of the magic meteorite metal, no. The whole idea of the magic planetary alignment, no. So Dr. O. Scrooge here is going to say the science of Lara Croft's and the costuming does not fly.
All right. Scientifically, the triangle of light does not fly.
No. Get that out of here. Who they think we are? Coming up with a planetary alignment like we didn't go to school or something.
Well, I mean, look, yes, I said for me it rang a little false, but you did bring up like the zodiac and stuff like that, and there are plenty of people who like check their astrological forecast every single day. So I love astrology. Wait, remind me, what sign are you?
I'm a Pisces.
Okay.
And you?
I'm a Libra.
I knew it. I'm just
Why?
kidding. I'm teasing.
So that's why when you have movies like Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and they rely on these artifacts that maybe are a little more magical than scientific, they find audiences that are like, yeah, sure, because I don't know. I would sort of love to find out that there is real magic in the universe.
Well, if there is, it happens via some mechanism, and once you find that mechanism, it becomes science.
Right. Well, so we know that quote from, Thor, where she says it in Thor, the Asgardians say,
"Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing."
Which ultimately comes from the original quote. It's Arthur C. Clarke who said it.
Yeah, right.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Exactly. Yes.
So the story question in here then is whether it's science or magic, do we think that the triangle of light works to create some story magic? So the thing about the triangle of light is that it's basically, it's a MacGuffin. And so what a MacGuffin is in a story term is it's that thing that kind of is the reason for being there, but in the end, it kind of doesn't really matter. And Hitchcock used the term, he said the MacGuffin is the thing that the spies are after, but the audience actually doesn't care. There's another term. There's a long ago actress named Pearl White who also referred to it as like the weenie. The thing that the heroes or the villains or the spies are chasing so that they, sort of end up going through all these convoluted plots. But at the end of the day, it's not really about the weenie. It's about the chase and the adventure of it all. So now you see how that like fits into this movie. Like our triangle of light is the thing they're all after. And because of it, they go to these, crazy locations and stuff like that. I think you could say like we see that a lot in, it's a hallmark of the Indiana Jones movies. Right.
There's always a weenie.
There's always a weenie. There's always a
weenie MacGuffin.
Exactly. So the question is this a good MacGuffin? Is it effective? And for a MacGuffin to be effective, what really matters then is the reason behind it. So what we learn about Lara Croft is the reason ultimately that this matters to her is twofold. One, as you were talking before about, the fact that her dad has left this secret trail to her, and he's left her with this mission to keep these two pieces from being reunited and to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. And her dad died. We never really find he's essentially MIA. She never really knew exactly what happened. It's a mystery. And her mom died when she was super, super young. So, she's got this yearning to see her dad. We see early on in the movie that like it's the 15th of the month, which, is the day that her father that it's on the tombstone of him being gone. And so she
I thought you were about to go into the it's the first of the month, but only do it with 15th of the month. But anyway.
No, so she misses her. It's established pretty early.
The 1st and 15th, that's when the checks come. Anyway.
There you go, I like that. That she misses her dad. And so, when you look at it that way, and then the other piece of it is that ostensibly it controls time. So if she was able to reunite these two pieces with the help also of this clock that her dad leads her to, which basically is a key that is used in these various locations to help find the pieces of the triangle of light, right? So you've got the clock, which is the key. You go to each location. It helps unlock finding the half of the triangle. And then they get reunited. And this can only happen when the planets are aligned. Mm-hmm. Then essentially she could control time, and she could either go back and change time so that her father's still alive, or at the very least go back and find him and meet him. So you've got, a pretty strong reason there. Like, I'm a sucker for daughter-daddy stories. Like, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
However, the villain, Powell, who is played by Ian Glenn, who, for those of you who are Game of Thrones fans, you might recognize him as Ser Jorah. So that may be a more familiar role that he's played. He doesn't really have a reason. He's just evil. He's Illuminati. That's
it. That's all you need to know. Illuminati.
That's all you need to know. But there's no it's the stakes are not set up. Like, you don't know why he cares other than just like full on generic evil.
It's
just evil. Yes. Right.
Control time, take over the world.
Right. And so that's where I'm like, I don't know how effective a MacGuffin this is. Because like in the best movies, the villain's motivation is just as strong as our protagonist's motivation. And Angelina Jolie can totally sell it. And Ian Glenn is really fun to watch. But like, I don't know. And then, okay, there's also like a couple of bumps in setting this whole thing up about like where these two pieces are. So you were talking before about the meteor, right? So part of the setup is that there was this city, this meteor hit. There was this city that formed in the crater. That's where the original triangle of light was. Horrible things happened, and that's when they destroyed it and hid these two pieces so that this great destructive power could never be used again. And my question is, and they also talk about the idea that this planetary alignment only happens every 5,000 years. Well, if this original destruction happened that many years ago, and pretty much the fastest mode of transportation was a horse at that point, the two pieces are hidden. One is hidden in Siberia, and one is hidden in Cambodia, right? In these two sort of different temples.
Yeah.
How would they even know about the existence of Siberia and Cambodia at that time?
Right.
How would they even know?
They asked the magic triangle of light. That's
right. Yeah, they asked the triangle of light. So like,
well, clearly, if it's destructible and you never want this to happen again, why break it into only two pieces?
Yes, exactly. Why is that considered effective?
Like, you could just melted that sucker down again and turned it into vapor if you wanted, right? You could vaporize it.
Right. Like, why save it at all? Why not actually destroy it? And again, even if, I don't know, maybe it is indestructible because it's, it's composed.
Clearly not. Clearly not. All it took was one bullet and Lara destroyed it. So,
So it all like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's much more like a magical device than a scientific device. And I have to say, like, there were a number of writers, and I will say that, sometimes when you have a process where you have many, many things, people touching something, you lose a little bit of story sometimes.
The many cooks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say, from my perspective, the triangle of light as a story driver in this, it does not fly. There's way too many bumps. I'm just not on board with it. I think it crashes and burns.
Crashes and burns.
I will say this, like behind the scenes
vibes. For the Powell, West, and look, one thing we can say is for an action movie, it did deliver some action scenes, not a whole bunch of like lost in love scenes. Like can happen sometimes.
No, but I will say this, like there are some really cool set pieces in this. I mean,
yes, is true.
I will say, there are other movies we've gone back and looked at and talked about, like, does the CGI hold up? Do the effects hold up? I mean, I think when we had, like, for example, our Transformers conversation, which was 2000, the live action movie was 2007. Right? We both loved the CGI and it holds up. The special effects in this movie, not so much. But that said,
not so much. Yeah.
2001, for its time, there are some really, really cool set pieces. They shot it at Pinewood Studios outside of London, which is most famously probably known as where they often shoot James Bond movies. And, there are there's these two major set pieces. There's the Temple of 10,000 Shadows. And then there's, it's a tomb that's in Cambodia.
Even the house, even the home in the beginning is pretty cool.
Yeah. So like the world that they set up is really neat. And they did, they set up the temples were built and the tombs were built on the soundstage, but they did actually shoot in Cambodia. So they had to match that. And then they didn't go to Russia. They didn't shoot in Siberia. They actually subbed in Iceland for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bucket list location for me. Hope it
Same.
goes better than the Vomit Comet. Anyway.
Um, but like the 10,000 Shadows one has an orrery, which is basically a big mechanical version of the solar system. And that's really
Ooh,
cool. Like I would
that
love
is
to
super
be
cool.
there exploring that.
Yeah.
So from like a world building perspective, from
Right.
the vibes, like I'd want to
Yeah.
be there. Like I felt like I was, there's a nod to the game there too,
Right.
with these great settings and stuff.
I love the archaeologists as a hero going to tombs and
Yeah.
ancient locations. Yeah, I love that element of it. And it's really mind-boggling to me that even today, after a couple hundred years of real archaeology, people are still finding stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and, that's part of what made the game so popular. And when you think about the fact that, this is one of the first sort of female-led action movies with this kind of character, that's really fun to see on screen.
Oh, it is. It is. So I guess, so I wonder, do people think of archaeologists as scientists? Like, if there's you do? I mean, no, in terms of like a movie, like when you saw Harrison Ford's character.
Indiana Jones?
Yeah. Did you think scientist or just adventurer?
I mean, with him,
like in our mind, we know that archaeologists are scientists, but in these movie roles,
right?
It seems to me like they don't really come across as much as scientists as some other roles, because they're sort of like the lab coat and
watching somebody trying to do carbon dating isn't really cinematic.
Right, they're never in the lab. They're never really in the lab. They're always in the field. Yeah,
right. I mean, I guess I do because I'm prone to like the idea of an expanded vision of what science is and what scientists do. So like for me, it's never been just like the scientist in the lab. It's also the scientist out in the field, whether that's somebody trekking through a jungle, who's a botanist, or an archaeologist who's adventuring. Now, granted, archaeology does have a crossover with, the humanitarian culture piece of it and anthropology. So, but I mean, I think of it as science, but yeah, you're right. That's a really good question. So for folks who are listening or if you're watching, I'd love to know in the comments, how do you think of archaeologists? Do you think of them as scientists mainly or
movie archaeologists?
Yes, I was going to say when they're seen in when you see them in the movies.
Yeah, because for a character to be a scientist, right? It seems like they want to really handhold you and lead you down that this is a scientist. They're wearing their scientist garb. They have their scientist personality. But, these archaeology cats they're more like Red Bull athletes or something out there,
Well, so it's interesting that you bring that up. So my Sirens partner wrote a piece about the most recent Twisters movie, the update that they did. Yeah. And one of the things that the whole larger piece was about like a comment about the movie was that they didn't really address anything about climate change in it. And some people had a problem with that. And one of the things that she talked about in the piece that she wrote was this idea that they don't hit you over the head with the science of it. They just show it to you. And whether you have, because there's like two teams. You've got your team that's sort of more like science-y driven, and then you essentially have your storm chaser, like influencer adventure team. They don't hit you over the head with like, this is a scientist, this is not. They show different people sciencing in different ways, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I love the more of the show, don't tell thing, and you just experience the experience of its own. So I love the adventure of it. And, again, I'm just so thrown off by how they did this whole costuming thing. I feel like it was a big distraction from the movie for me.
Really? What?
Yeah. Because
just like to be really like direct about it. Did you feel like it played? So first of all, you can't talk about this movie without talking about Angelina Jolie. And that's where I was going to go kind of for our final like vibes of it. But I guess to kick that off, Mike, are you saying that you felt like the costuming was too sexy or not sexy enough?
I felt like it was such an artificially thrown in thing that it was distracted in that way. I didn't find it sexy at all. I know some guys did.
Yeah.
But, I'm also the type of guy that doesn't find man-made body parts necessarily something that interests me. And it had that look of just like you added a prosthetic that was unnecessary and distracting.
Okay.
Because in the game, it does have that standout role. It's such a thing. And I felt like for the movie, you should have just thrown it out and just let her be herself, and we don't need that,
That's interesting because I guess
it didn't distract you.
No, I didn't find it distracting at all. I mean, look, I'm very aware of the fact that, it is a movie based on a video game. There is a huge, huge audience, fan base for this character, for this world. And so I didn't mind the kind of costuming nods to that. It didn't take me out of that and we've talked before about like managing expectations when we go see things, and sometimes it's what you come in with. So knowing I was going into this movie based on a video game that has a particular aesthetic, I was like, there she is. There's the character. And at the end of the day, what makes this movie work is the casting, and it's Angelina Jolie. I mean,
well, there you go.
And like keeping things in context too. Like there were other people who were in contention for the role. Depending on what you read, it's actually really weird because some people say Angelina Jolie was always the only one. Others are like, no, these other people were in contention. But the interesting thing is to think about, like for me, is to think about when this actually kind of came up in her career. Right? Because she had already won her first Academy Awards at the 2000 Academy Awards. She'd already had critical acclaim for Gia, for Girl Interrupted, for George Wallace. So she was a serious actress on the rise. Obviously, incredibly beautiful, incredibly attractive. But this catapulted her into the mainstream in a very, very different way. But this was also the period of her life where like, she was, I forget if she was still with Billy Bob Thornton or not, but she carried like a vial of blood around her thing. She, gave the like full kiss to her brother on the stage when accepting. So this was like prime rebellious Angelina Jolie. And when they thought about the casting, Simon West talked about this idea that, well, they could have gone a lot of different ways. He wanted some of that like rebellious energy, even so much to the point that when they first met about it, she was like, all right, well, she's British, should I take like etiquette lessons or things like that? And he was like, no, because I want I want somebody who's actually going to push back against that.
The lady should be modest.
Yes, a lady should be modest.
And she does, she does it. She does it perfectly.
Yeah, for being a movie that is like doesn't fly on so many ways, it still flew.
And we're not the only ones who think so. I like finding some interesting quotes, and I have to give props to film critics who really are wonderful writers as well. And of course, one of the best ones of all time, Roger Ebert. And listen to what he wrote, and I agree. All right. Lara Croft Tomb Raider elevates goofiness to an art form. Here is a movie so monumentally silly, yet so wondrous to look at, that only a churl could find fault. And please don't tell me it makes no sense. The last thing I want to see is a sensible movie about how the Illuminati will reunite the halves of the severed triangle in order to control time in the ruins of the ancient city that once rose in the meteor crater if, and it's a big if, the clue of the all-seeing eye inside the hidden clock can be used at the moment of planetary alignment that comes every 5,000 years, and if the Tomb Raiders are not destroyed by the many-armed Vishnu figure and stone monkeys. The logic is exhausting enough even when it doesn't make sense.
Talk about exhaustion.
Who cares? This is like a classic example of when the science doesn't make sense, the story doesn't really make sense. And
looks good.
It looks good. Great. It's fun to watch.
Adventures.
I want to go on adventures with Angelina Jolie. I want to go see ancient temples, and I just have a good time.
There you go. And stone monkeys.
Bring them on.
Get them out of here. No, they're scary.
They're scary. Let's stay away from the stone monkeys.
All right. So again, another no. Yay! Yeah.
agree.
It flies
It
for the
flies.
vibe.
It flies.
For the vibes. But they cheated. Angelina Jolie. Let's say it wasn't Angelina Jolie. Let's say instead it was starring Kelsey Goldberg.
That's our producer. I will also say, I will also say that there's obviously an iconic look both for this character and in the movie, whether it's, this one, whether it's future renditions, the one that starred Alicia Vikander or the upcoming Netflix series. I too adopted that when I was shooting an episode of Tomorrow's World Today, the show I do for Science Channel. And we were shooting in Sumatra. And I was like out in the middle of the forest, like up on a big fire tower.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And I went full Lara Croft, like hair pulled back,
nice.
the braid.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this podcast was fun for those of you who joined us. And you can catch us here every Friday. A new episode comes out with Tamara and me talking about what we love, what confuses us, and what just doesn't fly. So tune in. Where can they find us, my good friend?
They can find us on all socials at Does It Fly Pod. You can find us at doesitflypod.com. And also keep your eyes out for a related mini episode where I talk to the showrunner of the upcoming Netflix series.